Well, welcome back everyone to the Energy Update Weekly for the week ending August 20, 2022. So let's get to the boards and see what's going on this past week in the petroleum industry. Okay, so we are going to start out with oilprice.com. We are tracking WTI crude, which is West Texas Intermediate. And this is 18-hour-old data, $90.77 a barrel. A week ago, it was $92.09, so down roughly $1.25 a barrel. Over on this chart, we can look at the 1-year record, and October 21, a year ago, September, October, down below 75, probably $60 a barrel. You can see this steep rise, and now it is coming back down, but still has quite a ways to go to get to the levels that it was a year ago. Okay, as far as rig activity, again, this is data that's compiled by Baker Hughes and reported on oilandgas.com. Total rigs for the week ending 8/19 was 762. That was down 1, and it is still up 259 rigs over what it was a year ago. So that is looking pretty good, and it's been pretty steady. You can go down here and look back into the beginning of summer in May, and it's been in the 700s and slowly creeping up and dropping back and whatnot, but it's been pretty steady. So that's good to see. Frac crews running last week, week ending 8/19, 5 less fracs this past week, so down to 280. A week ago it was 285. Week before that 289. So dropping off a little bit, but still pretty consistent in the upper 200s. 280 is probably a pretty good average for the past several months. Okay, looking at Energy Information Administration, let's look at the price of gas per gallon, and you can see that last week the gas prices came down again, but kind of tapered off. If you look at these last 2 points there, they're tapering off. It's been a pretty steady decline through June and July, and now it looks, we'll see if that trend continues, but it looks like it might be sloping off a little bit. It would be great if it kept on tracking down and gets back down another 75 cents or so a gallon to where it was a year ago. Much more comfortable at the pump when it's at those prices, and more reflective of what the true value of the petroleum is, in my estimation anyway. Okay, if we look down through this, here is a graphic that just shows the price of a gallon of gas across the U.S. Average U.S. $3.94 a gallon. I don't know what the regular is here in Rapid City because I don't use regular, so I'm not sure what that is. I think we are included in the Midwest region. It says 375. West Coast 491. So they're still getting hammered out there. Diesel prices they're still coming down as well. This trend that's been dropping since June, it maybe tapered off a little bit last week, but still coming down. And then here's the average prices of diesel across the country. Average nationally, $4.91 a gallon. Just here in the past week, the diesel prices in Rapid City have dropped down to $4.84. And for the 2 weeks prior to that, the pump price here in Rapid City was $5.15 or $5.19, depending on where you were. And 30 miles away from Rapid City, it was $4.84. So it was been that $4.84 for almost a month in some areas of the Black Hills. Rapid City has finally responded to that, and we're down at $4.84. Again, West Coast $5.50. So some areas are still getting hammered more than other areas. Okay, what do we want to look at here? Future prices for crude oil, $92.09, so that's up $3 over the past week. So there might be this suggests that it might spike up a little bit here over the next week. We'll watch. Again, today it was $90.77. Oil stocks, the blue is the weekly average, and you can see that over the 5-year range we have been tracking since July, clear down at the bottom and below the 5-year average with stocks. And right now, the crude oil stocks, 425 million barrels, down 7% over the week, down 10% for the year. And we'll take a look at, again, Cushing, Oklahoma, the oil hub, the storage hub here in just a minute. Okay, we're also looking at crude oil production, and you can see that it's pretty stable around 12 million barrels a day. Last week of data ending 8/12, and these data were reported on the 17th, which is just a couple of days ago, for the previous week. So this is kind of already a solid week-old data, but 12.1 million barrels a day, which is still just absolutely astounding, up by a factor of 3 over production in the U.S. just 15 years ago and 10 years ago even. And so this idea of the horizontal drilling and then the frac in the shale areas have been the cause of this huge increase in domestic production, which is a good thing. Okay, refinery inputs, 16.5 million barrels a day over the past week, and you can track back again for 6 weeks, and you can see it's pretty consistent, 16.5 million barrels a day. And refineries operating last week at 93.5%, and probably the average through here is about 93.5%. So that's been remaining pretty steady. Okay, refiner production, finished motor gas, about 10 million barrels a day last week. And then there's all the different types, reformulated, ethanol, blended with ethanol, ED55, all these different products that come out of the gasoline. This is the total number at the top up here, about 10 million barrels. Okay, Carojet or jet fuel, 1.7 million barrels a day. And then that's broken down between commercial and military. Distillate fuel oil, so a total of about 5.2 million barrels a day. About 5 million barrels a day of that is normal highway, 15 ppm sulfur and under diesel fuel. And then the higher sulfur content would be the red diesel or the ag diesel. Okay, stocks, again, we're going to not look at the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but looking at excluding that. So the total 1.2 billion barrels, and that is all products. Crude oil stock, 886 million barrels in stock. That's including SPR. We drop that off again. We're down to about 425 million barrels. So this is really kind of the key number right here of oil on the surface that's been produced and is sitting waiting to go into refining and those types of things. Stock of motor gasoline, 215 million barrels of refined gasoline sitting out there in tanks and in the pipe systems and running to your gas station, so you can go there and fill up with your gas. And again, all the different blends, ethanol, all these different types of products. Fuel for jets, Carojet, about 40 million barrels of Carojet, 112 million barrels of diesel fuel, and of course the majority of that is highway diesel, and then the rest of this is the red diesel for primarily agriculture. So if we look at all of these stocks up here, how long of a supply is that? So what this is here, days of supply for crude oil, for gas, Carojet, fuel, fuel oil, and then propane. And so this would be if total supply was interrupted and not another barrel of crude oil went into refineries, and we continue to utilize those materials at exactly the same rate, how long would the surface supplies last? And you can see that it's roughly 23 to 30 days, except for propane, which is about 3 months. So typically, and these numbers are very consistent and have been for quite a few years. That's the size of our infrastructure that we have roughly for crude oil, 26 days supply of crude oil sitting in tanks around the nation, ready to go to refining. Again, that if no more oil supply was coming in, and we continued to refine at exactly the same rate, that supply would last 26 days. Gasoline, about 24 days. Jet fuel, 24 days. Distillate fuel oil or diesel, about 30 days. And then propane, about 3 months. Okay, so this is a supply on the surface. And again, if that situation happened, if you think about it, and all crude oil was stopped, we would not be continuing to utilize at the same rate. And so things would change, and it would change dramatically, it would change quick, and these numbers would be extended probably quite significantly. Okay, so let's jump over to looking at another oil province. This week, let's jump over to the eastern part of the United States and look at the Marcellus Shale, or the Marcellus Formation, which is a Devonian black shale. So it is one of these shales that ranges in thickness from 20 feet to over 100 feet, depending on where you might be in this, where the shale exists. And it has been known to have gas in it in all the years of oil drilling and production in this part of the country, but not in any significant quantities, because shale is so tight, so low permeability, that there's no connectivity of pore space to release the gas into the pipe. And so it was not until this horizontal drilling, where instead of just penetrating, say, 50-foot thickness of shale, now you drill horizontally in that shale for maybe 10,000 feet, and now you've penetrated that shale for a tremendous distance, and it's hydraulically fractured or broken up, creating additional porosity and permeability that allows the oil, or in this case, gas, to flow into the pipeline, and it becomes very productive. So these shale plays are huge. They are very important to the energy situation of the United States. And you can see that here in this is in this area. You can see the counties. This is Pennsylvania and West Virginia in the Marcellus. A year ago, 29 rigs were running. Last June, it was up to 38. Now it's 35, so they've slowly dropped off a couple of rigs in the past 3 weeks. All of these are horizontal wells, which means, again, that they drill vertically to some depth, and then the bit turns from vertical to horizontal. It's driven out another 10, 15,000 feet, and then they frack that, and it comes online as production. 100% of this is gas, so this is a gas province producing natural gas. Okay, so the last thing I want to look at today is this this map that has a lot of things we can look at, and I just wanted to look at the pipeline system that carries crude oil across the country. So the first thing we're going to do is crude oil pipelines. We'll turn that on, and there you can see the crude oil pipelines. So these are the major pipelines that deliver crude oil from major oil producing fields and provinces into ultimately the petroleum refineries that are going to produce all of our products: the gasoline, the diesel fuel, the Carajet, the propane, butane, all of the gases, all those things. And so just for an example, up here in North Dakota, there are quite a few crude oil pipelines, but a crude oil pipeline does not extend to every well in these areas. So whether we're in the Bakken in North Dakota, whether we're in the Powder River Basin in Wyoming, it doesn't make any difference where we're at. These pipelines are gatherers for larger surrounding areas of oil and gas production. In this case, again, we're looking at the crude. And so what happens is when crude oil is produced at the well site, in most situations, that crude oil is stored in what is called a tank battery that is on location as storage tanks sitting on the well pad. That oil either goes by a small pipeline into a larger gathering facility for a field that then goes into these pipelines that are shown here, or it is picked up by a truck at the well sites and then taken to a terminal where it is put into the pipeline. So these pipelines then collect the oil from the oil producing regions and then ultimately take them into the refineries where they are being refined into the products that we use every day. So one of the things I want to look at is right down here in Oklahoma. You can see there's a convergence of a lot of pipelines in here, and we have looked at this in the past. This is Cushing, Oklahoma, and it is a major storage hub of crude oil. And as we zoom in, again, we've looked at this before, but all the tank farms in here begin to come into focus where crude oil is stored. So Cushing, Oklahoma has a very large capacity. I think the capacity is something like 77 million barrels of oil can be stored at this one facility. So again, if you look back at the previous chart from the EIA, the total crude oil in storage right now this past week was 425 million barrels. If these tanks were full, 77 million barrels, or a fifth or a sixth of all that total oil in stock would be stored at this facility. So it is a major facility. However, over the past year, it has been decreasing in its utilization, and I don't know why that is. But 77 million barrel capacity here. A year ago, the storage had about roughly 44 million barrels of oil. This past week, 22 million barrels. So they are below a quarter of, or right at a quarter of their total capacity this week, and it's been going down slightly for the past several months. And so we'll keep an eye on that, whether other storage facilities are being built and constructed. I'm not sure on that. Okay, but the facility at Cushing is not utilized to the level that it has been in the recent past, and just even recent couple of years. So this oil then eventually finds its way into refineries, and then from refineries it has to get to your gas tank. Okay, and there's two ways that happens. One is that trucks pick it up from refineries, take it to gas stations or wherever, and it's filled by trucks. Other of that product is moved by pipeline. And so this pipeline system is the pipelines that move petroleum product. Okay, so gasoline, diesel, all the different blends of gas, and they'll move through the same pipeline at different times. And so what happens is a pipeline will, say, pump regular gasoline, and they'll pump so much volume of that into a storage facility that exists at the end of the pipeline or some point along the pipeline. And then they will place what is referred to as a pig or some type of a plug in the pipeline to separate the next type of material. So let's say regular gasoline could be followed up by diesel fuel with a plug between them that's pumped down the line that keeps those materials separate. And then the diesel would go into a diesel tank at the end and of that line, and you end up with all these different products being delivered across the country. So let's focus in. I'm going to show you just here in the Black Hills. So let me zoom in on the Black Hills a little bit. And way over here to the west in Wyoming is Newcastle, Wyoming. And there is a small refinery over there. It's somewhere around a 50,000 or a 75,000 barrel a day capacity refinery. And it gets its crude oil from out here in the Powder River Basin. There's major crude oil pipelines going through here, and they tap into that or are truck delivered and get their crude oil. So it is refined here, and then it goes into a production pipeline, and that goes to the south of the to the east of the west of the Black Hills. It flows to the south, then it flows eastward, and then north along the eastern flank of the Black Hills into Rapid City, and this is where we get all of our fuel. Now, some products are still trucked by truck. Trucks go over here and pick it up, then drive around this route and deliver. But a lot of it is produced by pipeline into a small tank battery on the east side of Rapid City. Now you can see on this graphic, this red line is just digitized off of a map product, and it shows that pipeline ends right over here. And if we look here, there's nothing here but a building, and in fact, if we go about a mile to the west, here's the tank battery. So this digitization missed the tank battery a little bit. But here's the storage tanks in Rapid City. So if you're from this area, this is where a lot of your gasoline will come from. Again, not all, because some is trucked in. But again, the lids on here, well, they're floating, and so as the tank fills up, the lid fills up. So this is a full tank, this is a full tank. This one is probably totally empty. You can see the sun shining on the inside of the tank, and you can see that tank in here. This is a partially evacuated etc. Now, one of the reasons there's a tank battery in Rapid City and that we don't get all of our fuel by truck is that if we zoom out just a little bit here, so this is Interstate 90 right here, and if we move just northeast a little bit of just a few miles, we are going to arrive at Ellsworth Air Force Base, and they get their Carojet by pipeline from that facility, and so it's a more direct route than trucking, and that's probably the major reason we have the pipeline directly into Rapid City. And if we zoom in here, we are a B-1 base, and here's 5 B-1 bombers sitting on the tarmac. Here's another one up here, and that's they get their fuel from Powder River Basin. Okay, so that is the update for this week. What's going on in the petroleum industry. I hope you find this useful. If you do, please give me a comment or things that you'd like to see, changes, and I intend to keep going on this. We'll just keep checking to see what the viewer status is and if it seems to be popular or not. So again, I appreciate you watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and we'll see you next week.